The following broadcast was produced by the Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco as part of our Lighthouse Learning Library.
So we want to talk about, now that we've talked about the organization and its needs, now let's talk about your needs. And as an employee, you have the ability to do things to transform your own workplace from a situation of entanglements and torture to something that's fun, upwardly mobile, and often hugely profitable. So how do you do it? How do you make yourself indispensable on the job? And once you do, how do you get your employer to give you what you want? Those are some of the themes that our next speaker, Gena Harper, is going to talk to us about. Gena Harper has been on the Lighthouse board for a couple years now. I knew her because of some of her community activity. She was involved in civic organizations in the East Bay, foundations, charities, many different things. What Gena does today is she's senior vice president at Smith Barney, a huge financial operation where she manages other people's money. How much money? She manages something over $500 million of other people's money. She's one of the top 10 producers for Smith Barney in the United States. How'd she get that way? It's a journey that might seem a little improbable to you because she wasn't born that way. And she found the ways to, what's the phrase this week? Suck it up and become who she wanted to be. So it's my pleasure and honor to introduce Gena Harper.
So as Brian said, my name's Gena Harper, and I do work for Morgan Stanley Smith Barney. I've been a financial advisor since 1987, and it was funny because some of your questions, it's sort of like I've dealt with so many of those things, and some of them they seem so simple, but they are real issues in life. So I thought I'd sort of tell you where I came from and how I got where I am today. And there's a few bottom line themes. So one is, I would say the key to my success is I'm persistent, I'm determined, and I'm super curious. So I wasn't that way, though, as Brian said, when I was a child. When I was a child, I was born with congenital glaucoma, and I could see much better than I can see today. And today, for those of you who can't see, I have a guide dog named Asia that I use. And as Mike said and other people have said, mobility is one of your keys to success. So I use a cane equally as well as I use a dog. I mean, that's more towards what event I'm going to. I mix and match the two. So I was raised by my mother, and I had a brother named Sean. And as I said, I felt like I could see too good enough to be blind, but I couldn't see good enough to see. So I never really fit in. And I went to a public school, and my mother had no experience with raising a disabled child, and we didn't know any blind people or visually impaired people. So we were just sort of on our own. And my experience about that was I learned to like adults because the adults I dealt with were more reasonable than the children, because children can be mean. And I listened a lot to what those adults said, and that was not a good thing. I changed that theory in the end. But in the beginning, again, it was I would befriend adults, mostly my teachers and other adults who were more mature, and they weren't mean. And I pretty much just stayed by myself, and I struggled through school, and I really struggled through school. I did have a resource teacher, and they were helpful. I mean, that just didn't, those of you that are here know that doesn't really help much. So I pretty much would hear that I couldn't do certain things, and I was put in a special PE class, which was stupid and useless, right? And I didn't like that. And then I decided, because I make everything difficult, that I wanted to go to a private high school because their education was better, and I knew that. Okay, so my brother went to the public school. He was older than me, and I knew that this school was better. So I gave up any of my sort of the services I could get from the city or the state, and I just said, who cares, right? And I just went to this private school because I wanted a better education. But that was my first endeavor into I needed to pay for this, okay, this education, and because my mom didn't have very much money. So I got my grandpa to agree to pay half the bill, and then I went to the church and I got a job. And this, I heard some of you talk earlier. So again, I really couldn't see well. I could see much better, but it was a job answering phones and filing. And at this point, again, I really did have no self-esteem, and I totally wanted to hide that I couldn't see. I did not want people to know I couldn't see, which again was a little silly because one of my eyes is pretty large, and the other one now I wear a shell, so they look really pretty and they look the same. But at the time, my left eye was very receded. It was pretty obvious that I couldn't see, but I thought I was tricking everybody. So the phone thing I had down, right? So if there were people around, I'd answer the phone. Then it was a situation where I could lock the door, so I'd lock the door, and then I'd do all the filing, because then I could see well enough, but I just have to look really close and, you know, all the things you have to do if you can't see well. So I just hid that. That was pretty good. And then but again, as I got older, people kept telling me I couldn't do this and I couldn't do that. And then my eyes were getting worse. And finally, I had a rehab counselor, and they kept saying, you should use a cane. You need to use a cane. You need to learn how to read Braille. But using a cane was the last thing I would ever do, because I was convinced I would look ugly and old, and I already felt like ugly, that I looked ugly, and I didn't have any self-esteem, so I'm like, no, that's not going to happen, right? And then I got out of high school a year early because my eyes were getting worse, and I went to college. And then so I memorized everything. All these things people have said before me. I would have somebody take me and show me where all my classes were. And you could do this too. I think getting a job, this is a good thing to do, okay? I did it because I wanted to hide my vision, but I would also do it now that I don't want to hide my vision, just so I would look more graceful and I would know where I was going and I wouldn't have any anxiety about that. But at the time, that was all driven by I wanted to hide that I couldn't see well. And then I ran into a barricade and I fell down a set of stairs because I didn't use a cane. Yeah, that wasn't so great. So I decided to finally go to the Orientation Center for the Blind in Albany, and they gave me this hideous, ugly cane. And I remember that I went to BART the very day. I didn't know how to use the cane. And this woman said, do you need to know what BART train it is? And I thought, I have needed to know for 17 years what BART train it is, okay? So I was so relieved, you guys. The cane became my friend that very day, and I loved that cane, and I liked that people didn't think I was stupid, that they knew why I would ask questions that were obvious if you could see. So I sort of kind of gave up the hiding thing, okay? And at this point at OCB, I felt like I had been in a prison again my whole life previous, that I didn't get to do things and I didn't participate in a lot of activities because my mother didn't know how I would do that, and nor did the adults in my life know about, just making it work out kind of thing. My theme is buck up. Whatever, you guys have a different thing. Mine is buck up, but I wasn't buck up girl all the time. So I, at OCB, signed up for anything they offered. So I signed up for rafting and skiing and rock climbing. I just felt like I'd been let out of prison. And I also met a lot of very successful blind people that had really good jobs, because I also thought I was never going to be anything good ever. I was convinced of it because everybody I knew that could do everything better than me. So if they could see, they could do it better than me. This was my mindset. So anyhow, it's a very long 48-year story, and I don't have all day, but I ended up taking up skiing, okay, and I got really good at skiing really fast. Simultaneously, there's two things going on at the same time, I went to college, and one of my teachers, I had to have an eye operation, and they gave me an incomplete, and it really pissed me off, right? I'm like, they wouldn't let me come back and finish, and this incomplete was around Thanksgiving. The eye operation was around Thanksgiving. So I said, okay, I'm done with you. I'm not going back to college. So I did go to Laney College in Oakland, and there was a program where you could learn computer, like dictaphone transcription kind of stuff. And they had everything on tape and things in Braille, but they would let you go at your own pace. So I thought, okay, this is my solution. So anyhow, I ended up learning all this computer stuff, and I went to apply for a job at a large insurance firm. Same thing. I still didn't want the lady to know I couldn't see well, so I did go in advance, and it was a dictaphone job. And I wasn't thinking clearly because I show up there and she wants to give me a spelling test, typing test from a written book, right? And well, first of all, she's like, here's your job application. Can you fill this out? And I said, how about I'll fill it out at home and I'll bring it back to you. She's like, no, that's not going to work. And she was, of course, she was on to me completely, but she just kept playing my game. So then the spelling test, I said, it's a dictaphone job, Vicki. Her name was Vicki. Okay, Vicki, it's a dictaphone job. So how about you read me the words and I'll type them. But again, I still never said, you guys, I can't see very well. And so anyhow, she gave me that job. And that was my first job where I got paid well and had vacations and things like that. And she has been in my life pretty much ever since. And I thought she was a mean witch at the time because I didn't think she handled that situation well, but it was me that didn't really handle it well. And so I did that job and I did my skiing. And then again, it's a very long story, but I didn't finish college. This is very important, okay? Because my themes, again, are persistence, determination, and curiosity. But the other thing is, I don't take no for an answer. So if you want me to take no for an answer, that's a bad thing. But if you want something done, that's a good thing, right? So it depends on what side you're sitting on, if taking no for an answer is good or bad. But so then from the skiing, I got second place in an international downhill ski race, and I was only female American to place. And right then I decided that I could do things better, some things better than people that could see, which was the skiing. And that just gave me a lot of confidence. And so I got to do a bunch of public speaking things. And this was while I was being my dictaphone transcriber gal at the insurance company. And that was going well. And it was fine. That was all fine. And then I met a guy that said, you would be a great financial advisor. He came up to me out of the blue, you guys, just out of the blue, he came up to me and said this. And I had never taken an economics class. I didn't finish college. And he says, you just have a really good personality. So one of the things I want to sort of parlay onto Mike's presentation is networking. So the second the guy said this, I've always been super optimistic. And at that point, I did think I could do things and I had capabilities. And so I thought, like, who do I know? Who do I know that is a financial advisor? So there were some guys at a church I went to. And so this is critical. You got to think about who you know, and you have to ask them for what you need, okay? So and again, I was nobody at this point, and I said, hey, you guys, I'm interested in learning about being a financial advisor. Can you give me a job? They're like, no, you don't have any experience. So I thought, well, how am I going to get experience? And at that time, you could just go volunteer at financial services firms. So I literally called up Dean Witter at the time, and I got the manager on the phone. I said, hey, my name's Gena Harper. I want experience. I'll cold call for you, and I'll do it after. My job was I could be done at 3, so I could go work for them at 3. And the guy's like, great. Now, again, still on the theme of didn't want him to know I was blind, which was dumb because I was going to show up. Didn't mention I had a guide dog. I had a reading machine at this point. Don't mention any of these things, right? I just get the guy to agree that I can do this volunteer job. So I'm supposed to go in about 4 weeks. And about, third weekend, I'm getting a little nervous. Like, oh, I got to go show up with all these things. So I call him and I said, hey, I failed to mention a little detail, and that is that I can't see very well, but I have a reading machine, and I am bringing my guide dog, but you're not paying me, so you have nothing to lose, and I know I can do it. Again, that sounds very confident, and I wasn't that confident at the time, but I was getting there from the skiing, and my other job I was doing well at. So you have to just be confident, and you should not apply for jobs you can't do, okay? So if you can do the job, then you got to say, I can do this job. So the guy said, great. Anyway, get long story, the same guys at the church did hire me. And through that, I started doing well at my job. And then it was all about, back to what Mike said, it was kind of networking, and I paid attention. To, my job at the time was just prospecting, right? So I would cold call people. That is a fabulous job for a blind person. Nobody knew that I was blind. They had no idea. And that whole theme, again, hiding the blind thing continued until I was probably in my mid-30s. You guys know I'm like 48. So you don't get over that quick, or I didn't. So again, even in my business, as I got more and more successful, I would meet clients, and I'd have the same encounters that you guys have mentioned earlier. Like I would go meet a client, and I didn't know that they had their hand out to shake their hand. So lots of times I just put my hand out, and hopefully they pick up the cue and they shake your hand. And if not, I just put my hand back down, and again, it's awkward, but it is what it is. So basically what I did is figured out what my skills were and how to basically just do what I knew I could do best, which was marketing. And I was also, I'm not being arrogant, I'm really smart. Okay, so because I didn't have a credential from college, I signed up for anything they would allow me. So now I have a special credential from Wharton that very few people have. And that was because I asked my employer, could I apply for that program? And I did get accepted, and so on and so forth. So I just continued. Again, I've had this same job, you guys, for like 26 years. But what's happened is I got more and more successful, and that is, again, using the themes of networking, not taking no for an answer, doing a good job. Other things about that I think you guys kind of brought up is I think you have to look nice. Okay, this is totally obvious, but you have to look as presentable as you can and look as current as you can. And things like Mike was saying, look at people, even if you can't see, you need to look at them. You need to try to just be as comfortable and natural as you can. And again, you are going to run into people that aren't going to give you a job. You can have all the laws in the world to protect you, and they're not giving you the job, right? So you just need to move on, sadly. And then there's other people that will give you a chance. And so I had to deal with the whole blind thing with my clients. So for about 3 years, I would never meet anybody. And my job is completely doable on the phone without meeting anybody because I didn't want them to know I couldn't see well. But by then, I had done such a good job managing their money, it sort of didn't matter. It was like, if you take your money away from me, you're the dumb one. It doesn't matter that I can't see. So anyhow, then I also have a business partner named Carla that I met in 1987. And that was, again, from networking. And I think this is critical. So what happened is I worked with all men. They were all much older than me. And I was really lonely at this. It's a lonely job. And it's all cold calling. And it's hard. So I just asked somebody I knew, do you know another woman financial advisor? And they said yes. So I called her up and we made friends. And this is a theme, again, about my success, is I don't hold anybody in higher regard than me. So there's been numerous times, you guys, where I'm going to just give you two quick examples. One, there's this guy named Sandy Weil. If you're astute at business, you will know this guy. He's started American Express, and he's very famous, older gentleman. Anyhow, I decided that I just wanted to meet him. So I just called him up. And I talked to his secretary, and at this point, he was dealing with my company that I work for. I said, I just want to meet Sandy Weil. And believe me, people don't just call up Sandy Weil and say they want to meet Sandy Weil. So I decided that that's what I wanted to do. I sat in his office. He literally talked to me by himself for like 40 minutes, and we had a lovely, normal conversation. And other times after that, I've called upon him when I wanted to know something. And another example is I went on a speech with my business partner, Carla, and we went to Annapolis, Maryland, and we were the speakers to a bunch of financial advisors. And we were all in bed. We're super boring, right, me and Carla. And so the person that asked us to speak, she says, all these people want to meet you in the bar. You got to come down. And again, we have no makeup on. We have jeans on. We were in our pajamas. So we're like, okay. So we go and we sit down at these bar tables, and you're super close. You're practically sitting on somebody's lap, right? And they're doing these introductions, and the guy next to me, I can tell this guy's important. I could just tell how people were talking to him, and they thought he was all cool and neat. And I didn't know who he was, and I really didn't care. It was fine, but to me, he was just a normal person. So after all these introductions and all these oohs and ahs over him, I said, do you work for Morgan Stanley? We're having our own conversation now. And he goes, yeah. He said nothing but more than one word answers, okay? Do you work for Morgan Stanley? Yeah. I said, do you work in Annapolis? No. Where do you work? He said, in Manhattan. I said, oh, what do you do? He said, well, I'm Morgan Stanley's chief investment officer. Now, my business partner does tons of our reading and reports to me, so I actually didn't know he was our chief investment officer. And I said, well, isn't it cool to sit next to somebody who doesn't know who you are and doesn't think you're important? And yeah, and you guys, he said yes. And so the next day he was speaking at 4, and my business partner Carl and I were speaking at 9. And about 8:30 he came and he sat down right next to me to hear our presentation. And he's been my friend ever since, okay, because I wasn't intimidated. So my point to you is you're going to be further your career in your own personal life if you reach out to people that you want to know, that you think are interesting, or sadly, if they can help further your career. So my ears are always out, and I'm always paying attention. So when I have conversations with people, again, back to sort of Mike's presentation, if I'm sitting with somebody on an airplane, I grab their business cards. I know everybody's phone number, even if I don't know them, okay? I have their business card. I know what they do. So when I want them, I do follow up, okay? That's critical. So I send a note saying, it was nice seeing you on the plane. If you're ever in the Bay Area, let's have a cup of coffee. Or when I'm in their area. And a lot of those things never pan out to be anything. They wouldn't be useful to me or to them. And then there's those relationships that are important and that I would have never got. So you have to be friendly. You have to do what Mike said about asking questions and being curious and inquisitive. And if they don't want to talk, you don't talk to them. And that has also helped me. So what I was going to say is, in conversations, if I'm talking to somebody, they'll say oh, I went golfing with my brother on Saturday. Okay, you guys, I completely register that in my brain. I know what people are doing and who they're doing it with. So even for my own business, I'll say, well, when's your brother retiring? Because I want his money, right? So we're like, when is he retiring? And I gather information just from listening, and I remember, and I pay attention to all those details. And again, I wasn't outgoing. People now say, oh, you'll do anything. You'll say anything, Gena. It's so easy. It isn't easy. I don't like doing a lot of that stuff, but I just muster up the courage and the guts because I know that's what I need to do. And so now, just to correct Brian, so now me and Carla are separately, we're business partners, are in the top 5% of all women wage earners in our industry. Forget the blind thing, okay? That's a whole separate story. And thank you. So that's kind of how I've done it. And then the last thing I sort of want to touch, and I don't know how I am on time here, but I'm okay on time, is, follow your passions. So I get crazy ideas of things, and I do everything I want to do, okay, first of all. If I want to do it, I do it. And about the not taking no for an answer, and I'm sure you've all experienced this, is I'm treated so often like some dumb blind person. It's ridiculous, okay? So I remember I went in, I wanted a pair of pink Reebok tennis shoes, right? So I go in with a friend. I say to the shoe salesman, I'd like a pair of pink Reebok tennis shoes. And they look at my friend and they say, which size does she wear? It's like, hello, I'm the one speaking to you. I just talked to you. You know I can talk. So my point about that is that I do get treated dumb, and there's a lot of, scenarios where it's awkward and uncomfortable. But I just proceed and I say, well, I wear size 8 or whatever you need to say. And you're going to run across people just sort of treating you stupid and doing stupid blind things. But I just mostly ignore them. So another thing, though, what I was really going to say, it was about, I wanted to go kayaking, and I call up the kayak company. And if they said, no, you can't go kayaking. I'm like, what about a double kayak? So again, now I do argue with people, okay? And I used to not do that. And if they say, no, really, this is what I think, you guys, life is short, and I say, I think this is probably being taped, unfortunately, but screw you. I'll call somebody else that'll let me do what I want to do. And a funny story about that, I was in New York, and I wanted to go ice skating at Rockefeller Center. And I'm a really good ice skater, okay? So I have a cane. I left the dog in the hotel to do them a favor right at the ice rink. And so the guy's like, you can't take that cane ice skating. You're a risk. I said, the people out here that don't know how to ice skate are the risk. I'm not a risk. I know how to ice skate. And this is my civil right to carry a cane. And if you don't let me, I'm going to own your ice rink. I mean, it's just going to come down to that, So, and then again, and sometimes that's a little obnoxious and pushy. And I try not to be obnoxious and pushy. That was like 15 years ago. I try to be sweeter and nicer about it and give my way in other ways. But sometimes that's what it takes, and you have to stick up for yourself. But as far as employment, as it goes back to the employment issue, you can't really act like that. You have to, again, go to interviews. And I want to talk about, somebody said, well, what if the interview's in a conference room and you don't know? Whatever information you can get, as those recruiters were speaking earlier, is really good. But my experience is you can't get that information. So basically, I do just say, you know what? If you wouldn't mind, would you please show me the chair? And I mean, if I really had to, I'd say, listen, I'm great at managing money, but I'm not great at finding the chair, okay? So, you use humor, and then people, they're anxious as well, and they're nervous, and they don't know how you can do the job. So that's why you're not going to get the job, because they can't figure out how you're going to do the job. So again, you can either put their mind at ease, and you don't have to. Again, I know there's all these laws. I say, forget the laws, whatever it takes to get the job. Meaning, if you say, well, I know you've probably never seen a blind person do this job, but I have special equipment, and I can do this job, and I'm more dedicated because I don't want to let you down. I don't want to disappoint you, and I know you might be thinking you're taking a risk. Now, again, recruiters and HR people may not agree with me, but this would be my approach, and it's pretty much worked, right? So I think you're just honest with them. You try to ease their mind. You try to explain to them how you would do it and how you're going to be dedicated, and you wouldn't ask for a job you couldn't do. And I have told people that. I say I would not ask for this job if I couldn't do it. I can assure you I can do this job. And then I let them ask me questions. Again, even some of them, maybe they're not legal for them to ask me, but the more information they have, the more likely they're going to like you, okay, and the more likely they're going to want to give you an opportunity. I mean, so likability and being open and friendly is critical. You can't go in there and be all uptight and stiff and a nervous wreck, okay? So you just have to be friendly and show your personality. And if you're not that kind of person, then you need to get that way. If you are not just generally a friendly, open person. I mean, some people aren't, right? They're uptight or they're whatever they are. That's not going to serve you in trying to get a job. So I think just being friendly and giving all the information you can and helping them understand how you're going to do the job, it will make a big difference in your life in the job interview process. So I want to share one more thing, and then I can have questions. So about doing whatever I want in my personal life, I get these wild ideas. So I had kind of had a really hard time in my life a couple years ago, and I decided that to get out of this hard time, I was going to do things that I wanted to do that I hadn't been doing, because I have 2 young children, so I'm doing the single mom thing and work. My job is very demanding, so I work a lot of hours. So I decided I was going to go cross-country skiing from Badger Pass to Glacier Point in Yosemite. So I do that, and then I meet this woman, and again, it's all about meeting people. So I'm going to interject another one of my key points, is you have to join organizations, and you have to get out of your room, as Mike said, okay? Going from one log to another or one chair to another is not going to serve you. So whatever your personal interests are, and if you don't have any, you better get some. You go and you join those groups and you volunteer, and that's when you reach out to people. You know, you call people up and say, hey, I want to volunteer. I want to work at your fundraiser. I want to do something to contribute to the world. So people love that, and you have to be creative. So I'm Miss Cycling. This is going to be my story. I turned into Miss Cycling, and so I wanted to volunteer at this big Century ride. And you guys, the truth is, most of the volunteer jobs, I looked through them. They were not things I could even figure out how I was going to do the job, right? So I talked to one of my friends, and he said, oh, you would be a great communications organizer. And I'm like, well, what is that? I didn't really know what that was. So what that is that it's a huge Century ride, like a couple thousand people. And they have all these sag wagons, and they have these ham operators that volunteer, and they communicate with the drivers, because there's not good cell service where this ride particularly is. And so I was the liaison between the ham operators and the people in the van. They were coming and going. You had to make sure they had all their emergency kits and all the stuff they needed. And that was a job that it was in a multi-purpose room. So I was alone with 6 people, but I mean, it was an environment that I could control. I wasn't with gobs of people that didn't know I couldn't see well. And that was a perfect job for me. And I got to meet a lot of people. So basically, through the volunteering or through this cross-country thing, I met this woman, and she mentioned tandem bike riding. And I had a tandem bike that I hadn't ridden for years. And I decided, I'm just going to start riding my bike again. So again, I reached out to different organizations. And I went, when Brian first got his job at the Lighthouse, I went there to say hi to Brian. And Tony, I've known for 20 years. Again, it's all about a small world, right? So Tony says, oh, you want to go on the Cycle for Sight bike ride? Now, the thing I didn't tell you about the cross-country ski trip is I broke my tailbone. But yeah, that was a big ouch. But anyway, so I'm like, okay, I'll do that ride with a broken tailbone, right? So I just did the 25-mile ride. And at the time, that was hard. But that was all about because I went on this cross-country ski trip. I met Brian. I went to see him. And then I saw Tony. And Tony invited me on the bike ride. So this started this whole spiral, you guys, where in the summer, I got an email. And it said, do you want to learn about training for the Paralympics? So I'm like, wow, that would be super cool, right? So I called the lady up and I said, I'm too old and I'm a single mom and I work all the time and I don't want to fill out this huge government application if there's not a chance in the world I'm going to get accepted. It was to go to a camp at the Olympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. And she said, no, you should apply. So I applied, you guys, and I got into that camp. There was only 2 women. I was one of 2 women. Now, again, this is all about, I don't let there be boundaries, and I really dream big. One of my themes in life is math and magic, and that applies to my job. So how math and magic applies is if I said, well, I want to be a $5 million producer, it's all math. You have to say, well, you have to have 200 clients, and that each client has to generate this number of revenue to equal $5 million, right? So every time Carla and I do our business planning, if I say I want to be a $5 million producer, the math will turn out to be that we're $4.5 million producers. We aren't $5 million producers in the math, right? I'm like, okay, well, the other 500 is magic. And it always works out, you guys, okay? We do goal setting. We're always super close to our goals. So this is about math and magic. So I dream big. I think big. I don't let people tell me no. So about this camp. So I went to this camp. It was so cool. I loved it. And I do love to exercise. And I didn't have such a regiment exercising because with the kids and my job, it's easy to find reasons why not to exercise. So from this camp, I hired a coach. And so I've been training since last November, 6 days a week on my cycling. And I made the U.S. Paranational Cycling Team in June, which was a big to-do. It was a big race in Georgia, and so I got to do that. But that was all because I dream big, and along the way, I've employed all the same principles. I found out who good blind tandem cyclists were, and I called them up and said, hey, I want to do what you're doing. How do you... I tried to find people that had jobs all day, because some of these people don't have jobs, and since I do, you know, I needed to know how to get all this training in. And I just called up these strangers. I just don't mind calling up strangers and asking them what I want to know. So anyhow, I have a passion for my job and for things in my life, and whatever I think is interesting or fun, I just go do it. So those are sort of my keys to success. And we could probably end there, or I could take questions and I'll think of something else, but that's sort of what I have to say.
Got the mic. Any questions? Have you completely covered it?
It's hard to believe, but maybe they're tired.
Oh, wait.
It is 5, 4,
You know,
whatever.
actually, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Is just in your workplace, how did you get Smith Barney to get you what you needed as far as equipment?
Okay, well, one thing is I made sure I knew what because now again, seriously, I'm very successful, so I can say I would like this, and I don't demand anything. I just say I'd like this, I need that, and I make so much money for them that it would not be in their best interest not to buy me what I need. But in the very beginning, I tried to need as little as I could get away with. Okay, I didn't ask for a lot, and I paid for what I could. But I did do things like I moved home with my mom, where I could save more money. So I like bought my own reading machine. And I think I asked them to buy a reading machine in my very first job. But also, at the time, I was still sort of integrated with the Department of Rehab, so I knew what I was entitled. I hate that word entitled, but I knew what they'd allow me to have, or what kind of within the rules I could have. So I also told my employer at the time, again, I don't know what's available now, there was some sort of program, right, where they either got some kickback or something to hire a disabled person. And I had no pride. I could care less. Whatever it took to get a job was, if they get kickback or not, right? That didn't make me feel any less of a person. So then as time passed, I try to keep my stuff in good shape. And again, I do go ask, and I justify how they're going to get paid back. Again, now I can just say, well, I'm making you a lot of money, so that's how you're going to get paid back. But at the time, I would say this is going to make me more productive, and this would help me earn more money, and I'm confident that, and again, we're talking, it's a $3,000 reading machine. So if it's a 4-person company, I mean, that is hard for them to absorb, right? But I always worked for medium-sized to big companies, and they've always given me what I want. But again, I've never been demanding. I make my stuff last a long time. I try to spend some of my own money, and I show them, well, I bought this reading machine at home. Would you mind buying me the one for work, kind of thing? So that's how I've done it.
Okay, we have a question back here.
Oh, I want to know, how do you qualify for the Paralympics?
Oh, you have to get on your bike and pedal your butt off really hard for a long time and go to races. No, you qualify. There's a series of qualification things. You have to go to races, and you have to make certain time standards, and you have to be in the certain standing, like the top 3, and so on and so forth. So there's a big old regiment, and that's how you qualify. So I haven't qualified to go to the Paralympics. I've qualified to be on the team for the U.S., and then I have to go do some more racing to really make it to the Paralympics. But you know what, you guys? My view on this is I exercise more. I'm in better shape than I've ever been. I've met cool people. So none of the stuff I do is ever a waste, even if I don't succeed. I don't have to succeed at everything. Just trying and getting out there and having fun is really what I enjoy.
Gena, I have a follow-on about getting what you want on the job. Your office is in Berkeley. Your home is out in Contra Costa County.
Yeah.
How do you manage the transportation? We could probably do a whole afternoon on transportation solutions, but you live far from work. How did you get what you want?
Well, I just keep having the same answer. So the same answer is because when I went to work for them, like I negotiated with them, and I knew that I needed a transportation budget. So I asked for a transportation budget. But before, when I wasn't entitled, I didn't live far away, and I would take BART, and I would take the bus, and I would walk. I actually, one time I had a job, and my job was in Lafayette, and I had an apartment in Lafayette, so I just walked. But what I do is I just go kind of ask. But also, if you're getting a new job and you actually are uber successful, then you have to think in advance of the things you want. The things I wanted was, I wanted to be able to work at home most of the time, which I do, which is awesome. So I don't have to go to Berkeley that often. I wanted a transportation budget that's kind of all I wanted. But recently I wanted a Braille display because was out of technology. And I didn't know those existed. So again, it wasn't like they just handed it to me. I mean, I had to write them a letter why I thought I should have one and how I thought it would help me, which made me vomit because again, I'm one of their top producers and I didn't think I should have to write that letter, but I did to be friendly and cooperative. And so they're getting that for me. So pretty much, again, I just ask for what I need. And again, it's a fine balance. You don't want to go in and say, I need all these things, because then they're going to say, oh, well, it cost me 20 grand to have you and nothing to have Susie Q over there. So, you have to just do your best. And as you prove yourself, then I think it's okay. And even if you did need a lot of things, unless you can't do the job, to say, well, I might want a Braille display this year, and maybe next year I could have a Braille embosser or an APEC or something like that. It's sort of one little thing at a time. Even now, I don't take it for granted, you guys, that I'm very successful and I could have what I want and I could be a jerk about it. But I do appreciate what they give me, and I appreciate that, I have a great job and things like that. So I'd never lose that sort of appreciation.
Gotcha. Gena, give us an idea of exactly what your day at work look like in terms of the details of what you actually do. How does adaptive technology help you, and how has what are some of the most limiting things about being blind doing that type of work? Again, you're all just gonna have to dream big, okay? So I knew when I was a teenager that I needed a job to make a lot of money because I thought being blind was expensive. You don't all want to hear this, I'm sure, but so I sort of fell into the job the way I explained to you. And then I did meet that woman that I mentioned by networking, and she was my age, and we became friends, and we did very different things. So what the company I worked for, we sold very aggressive stocks. We'd either make you a ton of money or lose it all, kind of, okay? But we would tell you that. We were very honest, and I wouldn't take all your money. I'd take 5% of your money, and this would, we'll call it speculation, okay? Now, Carla, my business partner, she was super boring, all right? She would tell you everything you wanted to know about a mutual fund, but she'd never say, do you want to buy it, okay? And I'm the queen of marketing, as I just told you. I'm not shy. I just call people and say what I want and do what I want. Now, she is super reserved, and she would never ask anybody, did they want it? So then she wouldn't have any accounts, and she was going to lose her job at one point, right? So at this point, we sat next to each other, and there used to be a hole in the wall where you'd share a computer. That was the technology at the time. It would like spin around. But I had my own stuff, she had her own stuff, and we decided we'd make this great partnership because I loved what she hated and she loved what I hated. So again, that's just like a blessing, and I don't know, again, from being friendly and from networking and how that all came into my life. And so the stuff what I use now is a CCTV, I use JAWS, I am getting a Braille display, but mostly, and I use my eyes and I use Zoom text. So it depends on the day and how long it is. So if it's like something long, I use JAWS. If it's something quick, I use my eyes and I use Zoom text and I change all the colors and I invert everything, and it's all complicated. But so what I do is we have like 200 clients, and these are individuals that have assets of like 2 million to 10 million, and we manage a lot of pension plans too. Okay, so that's a different section, but literally, we look at these people's portfolios, and it's very methodical. So we design plans for them. So we say, well, if you need $100,000 when you're 62 to retire, then here's how much money you need to save, and here's how aggressive you need to be. And we learn a lot about what kind of risk they're willing to take, and that's everybody very subjective, and everybody's personality is different. So literally, at this point in my life, I sort of come into work, sit down, read my emails, and then I have a list of to-dos, so I go off my list. So it might be, call Eleanor today because you need to raise cash for the next 12 months for her to have her monthly paycheck. So literally, I have many assistants, okay? So I have a technology analyst that works for me, and I say, run this report so I can see where Eleanor's money is. So he runs that report, and I use my CCTV to read that report. It's very antiquated technology they have for this report. So I use my CCTV, and then I figure out, I just do a lot of math, and mostly I do that in my head. You guys, I hardly ever use a calculator. I do all the math in my head, and it's all a percent and how much cash and stocks and bonds. And then I just, ring a dinger up and say, Eleanor, we need to raise $50,000, and I recommend that you sell this or that. Now, again, we have a technology analyst that does constantly reports on all our investments, and then they report to us.
And Carla does most of the reading of really lengthy, like economic reports and things. And the truth is, you guys, in my particular job, I don't really need to know a lot about what's going on daily. It doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the way I manage money. So I stick to very simple principles or a certain way of managing money. So I've avoided having to do excessive reading. And when reading is required, Carla does it. She either reads it to me or she tells me the bottom line. And so that's kind of it. That's what we do. We just manage these people's money. Does that answer your question? Oh, well, how blindness limits is, you know what, I'm slow. I hate that. I'm slower. And also, I never learn anything completely because I have too many things to do. So my JAWS, I know how to use it about, 30% of its capabilities. And Brian actually brought this to my attention. It was like I was totally struggling, really, you guys, using my eyes and struggling. And I knew Braille. I used Braille in college, but I'd forgotten, maybe 20% of it. I remembered most of it, but I never used it. And him and a rehab counselor kind of said, listen, you know what? You would be more efficient. Okay, about efficient, I have 5 million things to do in a day, and I get 4 million done, okay? The rest of the world has 2 million things, and they have 1 million. This is how I feel about it, right? So I figure, well, I'm getting way more done, so it's okay if I'm inefficient. But the truth is it makes me uncomfortable. It's hard on my eyes, and I'm really tired at the end of the day because I use my memory for so many things instead of technology. So since I sort of befriended Brian, I've taken a technology class. I'm totally really good on my Braille now. And I did want to interject that I think it's really important that you keep current. Somebody else had said that, like if you were an IT guy 5 years ago, that's not the same as it is today. So when you're not employed and you're bemoaning your fate, you need to be going to school and taking classes or volunteering at places to learn more skills and hone your skills or keep up your skills. And that is just critical. And you'll meet a lot of people, and that will lead you to something really good if you do that. But so the limitation is that I'm slow, and it's frustrating. But because I have a big team of people now, I do what I do best and what I can do the fastest, which is what I described to you, the managing the money and doing the math. And so it's not as limiting, but it is, the vision thing is limiting. And I would never want to do the job as it is in its entirety if I didn't have Carla. But she wouldn't either. Okay, she's perfectly sighted, and she would tell you she doesn't like the part of the job I do. So it's not really a blind thing. It's more about what you like doing the best or your skill set.
Okay, Gena, this is Ding. I got a question. How do you deal with call rejection? How do you do call calls? Because call calls is important in job hunting. How do you do it effectively, and how do you deal with rejection when you...
You deal with that in your personal life, in dating, and everything you do, and in the job. It's a numbers game. It's a dialing for dollars, okay? You just, when somebody says no or something icky, you hang up the phone, you say next to yourself, and you just dial the next number. And that's not a joke. That's what I do. It's like, you're not interested, fine. Once I call 200 people, I can guarantee you that 60 are going to be interested, out of 200. And so but I have to get to that 200 to get those 60 that are going to be interested. So the rejection, I try not to take it personal, and I'm not perfect. It depends. There's times when it's to take it personal, but I take it personal when people take their money away from me, right? When I don't think it was justified, that I take personal. But I've been working on that for the last 2 years, not taking that personal, but you really just have to know that there's lots of people that are going to say no, and they have lots of reasons. I mean, honestly, they may just have had a bad day, honest to God, and you might have called, and they just got some notice from the IRS that they're getting audited in their personal life, and they're going to be like, hate you, and hang up on you, right? So then you just got to keep calling, and that really, in all honesty, is the answer. You just have to keep calling for jobs, for anything you need to do.
Hello, Gena. I'm Farhang. My question is, have you found out a real way of asking questions or communicating where you get positive answers from your clients?
What does that mean exactly? Tell me more about your question.
All right, you say you get 60 out of 200 customers.
No, that's not on my clients. That's when I'm trying to get a client.
Get
my
a client.
Clients do what I want,
clients.
or they're not. They get called last.
Correct,
I mean,
correct.
if they don't do what I want,
So,
then they get called last.
Have you perfected a way where you think, okay, you will get a positive answer from a person you have called?
Okay, the truth of your answer is, like, we have this huge union 401k plan, and we're going to try to get some more where it involves real cold calling. And my reputation isn't going to matter. They don't know me from Adam. I have no credibility with these people, and I am going to cold call them. So my technique is I call and I say, hi, Susie, my name's Gena Harper. I work for Morgan Stanley Smith Barney, and I'm calling because we specialize in managing retirement plans.
are you the person that I should be speaking with about that, right? And they're going to kind of say yes or no. And then when I get to the person, I definitely do not like hard sell them. I really want to say, you know what, there's been a new, I try to have like a hook. So an example would be the IRS just changed the 401k rules. Would you like me to send you a copy of the recent changes by the IRS? So they're going to say yes or no. If they say no, again, I don't take no for an answer literally like that. So I would say, well, are there any particular topics you're interested in? Because we have a wealth of information. We're one of the world's largest financial services firms. So is there something in particular you may want information on? And, if they say no, I'll say, all right, well, you know what? I'm just going to give you a call back, if you don't mind, in 3 months. And maybe your situation will have changed. And I kind of leave it at that. I really don't get pushy in that situation. But I try to offer them something that they are going to want to know or to have. And that's usually works. And I also try to look for an opportunity to call them back. And I tell them I'm going to call them back. Then when I call back, I say, I spoke with you 3 months ago. You probably don't remember me, but I work for Morgan Stanley. And I was talking to you about retirement plan services. And again, I have an article about tax law changes. Are you interested? So so dripping on people. And I would definitely do that in looking for a job, you guys. There's so many things to tell you that you can't remember all these things. But if you call somebody and they're nice and sweet to you and they just don't have a job, I just say, hey, well, do you mind if I check back in a couple months? And then when I check back, I do say, do you know any other companies like yours that are hiring that because, my skills are really current and I'm really excited about having a job. And believe it or not, I swear to you, people will give you leads. They will. It's hard to believe and it's hard to ask. But if you just ask, you will get answers that will lead you somewhere good. Yeah.
I think that's it for questions.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. Well, you can see why we're so lucky to have Gena in our community, on our board of directors. And Gena, whatever you take in your coffee, I want that prescription.